Welcome to an inspiring story that will not only motivate you, but also help improve your English skills. Today, we're diving into the remarkable life of Albert Einstein, a man who revolutionized the world with his ideas and his courage. As you listen, pay attention to the new phrases and vocabulary I'll introduce. This isn't just about learning English, it's about understanding how persistence and curiosity can lead to greatness. So grab a notebook, focus closely, and let's begin this journey together. Improve your listening, expand your vocabulary, and draw motivation from the incredible life of a childhood genius. Childhood. Albert Einstein was born on March 14, 1879, in the small town of Ulm, Germany. His parents, Hermann and Pauline, were ordinary people. Hermann was a businessman who worked with electrical parts, while Pauline was a homemaker with a passion for music and learning. When Albert was born, there was nothing particularly special about him except for one detail. His head was unusually large. His family even joked about it, wondering if he would grow up to be a typical child. Little did they know this boy would go on to change the world. Albert was a very quiet child. He didn't speak his first words until he was almost 3 years old, which made his parents worried. Some people even thought there might be something wrong with him. His family started calling him the quiet one because, unlike other children, he rarely spoke, even when others were chatting away. But Albert wasn't quiet because he was slow. He was quiet because he was always thinking. He would sit for hours, observing the world around him, trying to figure out how everything worked. When Albert was 5 years old, his father gave him a small gift that would change his life forever: a simple compass. At first, Albert didn't understand how it worked. How could the needle always point north, no matter how he turned it? He became fascinated by this tiny object, staring at it for hours, trying to uncover the invisible force that guided the needle. This was the moment Albert realized that there were unseen forces in the world, and he wanted to discover them all. He later said that this experience left a lasting impression on him. When Albert started school, things didn't go well. He didn't like how his teachers taught. Back then, schools were very strict, and students were expected to memorize everything. But Albert wasn't interested in memorizing facts. He wanted to ask questions and find answers. His teachers often grew frustrated with him. One teacher even told him, "You're a disgrace. You'll never be successful in life." Those words hurt, but they didn't stop him. Albert struggled with some subjects, especially languages, but there was one subject he loved more than anything: mathematics. He called it the language of the universe and enjoyed solving problems like puzzles. Despite his challenges at school, Albert's family believed in him. His mother, Pauline, noticed his love for music and encouraged him to learn the violin. At first, Albert didn't enjoy practicing, but over time, music became a way for him to relax and clear his mind. Albert's uncle, Jacob, also played an important role in shaping his mind. Jacob loved math and taught Albert in a fun and creative way. He once told Albert, "Math is like a treasure hunt. Every problem is a clue that leads you to the solution." This playful approach made Albert fall in love with numbers. Albert wasn't like other children. While others played games, he spent hours reading books and imagining how the world worked. He loved stories, but he also loved thinking about the deeper questions of life. Albert often thought about great scientists and dreamed of making discoveries of his own one day. While walking home from school, he once asked himself, what would it be like to ride a beam of light? This question stuck with him for years, marking the start of his lifelong journey to understand light, space, and time. When Albert turned 15, his life took a difficult turn. His father's business failed, and the family had to move to Italy. Albert stayed behind in Germany to finish school, but he hated being separated from his family. He felt lonely and unhappy. Eventually, Albert decided to leave school before finishing. He couldn't stand the strict rules and harsh teachers anymore. Instead, he started teaching himself. He read books on science, philosophy, and mathematics, learning everything he could on his own. It was a risky decision. Many people thought he had ruined his future by leaving school, but Albert didn't care. He believed that true learning was more important than following rules. At just 16 years old, Albert wrote his first scientific paper. It wasn't perfect, but it showed his incredible potential. He also applied to a prestigious school in Switzerland, the Swiss Federal Polytechnic School, but he failed the entrance exam. He struggled with non-science subjects like French and history. Instead of giving up, Albert decided to try again. He worked harder than ever, improving his weaker areas and refusing to let failure define him. Albert's early life was filled with challenges and doubts. People didn't understand him, and he faced rejection and failure, but he never gave up. His curiosity, determination, and love for learning kept him going. He was determined to make something of his life. After leaving Germany, Albert moved to Switzerland, a country known for its progressive education system. The schools there were less strict, and students were encouraged to think freely, exactly what Albert needed. At 17, he tried again to get into the Swiss Federal Polytechnic in Zurich. This time he passed. However, his troubles were far from over. Even though he was now studying at one of the best schools in Europe, Albert's rebellious nature made it difficult for him to fit in. He loved studying mathematics and physics, but had little interest in other subjects. His professors didn't understand his way of thinking, and some even disliked him for not following their teaching methods. One professor told him, "You're a smart boy, Einstein, but you lack discipline." Albert wasn't the best student in his class. He often skipped lectures and studied on his own, while his classmates stuck to the curriculum. Instead of focusing on what was being taught, Albert spent his time exploring deeper questions. What is light? How does time work? Why does gravity exist? These weren't the typical questions students asked, and most people didn't have answers for them. During his time at the Polytechnic, Albert met a brilliant young woman named Mileva Maric, the only female physics student in his class. She shared Albert's passion for science, and the two of them became close. They often spent hours discussing scientific theories, challenging each other's ideas. Mileva wasn't just Albert's classmate, she became his closest companion, and together they dreamed of a future where they could make important scientific discoveries. Albert and Mileva shared a dream of making discoveries together. Albert once wrote to her, "Together we will conquer the world of science." However, their journey wasn't easy. Mileva faced criticism for being a woman in a male-dominated field, while Albert struggled with financial difficulties. Despite these challenges, they supported each other and remained focused on their dreams. In 1900, at the age of 21, Albert graduated from the Polytechnic with a degree in physics. He was eager to start his career as a scientist, but life had other plans. Albert couldn't find a job. He applied to several universities, hoping to become a professor or researcher, but he was rejected each time. His professors didn't give him good recommendations because they thought he lacked motivation. It was a tough time for Albert. Imagine working hard for years, only to face constant rejection. But Albert didn't give up. Instead, he took on whatever jobs he could find to support himself. In 1902, Albert found a job as a clerk at the Swiss Patent Office in Bern. His role was to review patent applications and decide whether the inventions were original. It wasn't a glamorous job, and it had nothing to do with physics. At first, Albert was disappointed. He wanted to be a scientist, not a clerk. But instead of complaining, he made the best of his situation. The job gave him free time, and Albert used that time to think about his scientific ideas. He started calling the patent office his thinking lab. While reviewing patents, he would secretly jot down his thoughts about the nature of light, time, and space. Albert was determined to pursue his dream, even if it meant working late into the night after his day job. In 1903, Albert married Mileva. The couple had a simple wedding, and soon after they welcomed their first child, a son named Hans Albert Einstein. Although they were happy, life was far from easy. Albert's salary as a clerk was not enough to support his family. They lived in a small apartment and struggled to make ends meet. Many of Albert's friends advised him to give up on his scientific dreams and focus on his job, but Albert refused. He once said, "I would rather struggle for my passion than live comfortably without purpose." Despite the hardships, Albert continued to work on his theories. In 1905, at the age of 26, Albert published a series of groundbreaking papers that would change the world forever. This year became known as Einstein's Annus Mirabilis, or Miracle Year. The papers included the photoelectric effect. Albert explained how light behaves like tiny particles called photons. This discovery later earned him the Nobel Prize in Physics. Brownian motion. He proved the existence of atoms, which was a groundbreaking achievement at the time. Special theory of relativity. This was Albert's most famous work, where he introduced the idea that time and space are relative, not absolute. From this theory came the famous equation E equals mc squared, which showed that energy and matter are interchangeable. These papers shocked the scientific community. Albert Einstein, a humble clerk with no university position, had just revolutionized physics. After 1905, Albert's life began to change. Scientists around the world started to take notice of his work. He was offered teaching positions and became a professor at several universities. Finally, his hard work and determination had paid off. Albert's hard work and determination were finally paying off. But he didn't let success go to his head. He kept asking big questions and pushing the limits of science. Albert believed that knowledge was limitless and that curiosity was the key to unlocking the mysteries of the universe. His journey, from a struggling clerk to a world-renowned scientist, shows the power of perseverance. He faced rejection, poverty, and doubt, but never gave up on his passion for science. His story teaches us three important lessons. One failure isn't the end, it's just a step toward success. Believing in yourself is more important than seeking approval from others. Big dreams often require big sacrifices. By 1909, Albert's groundbreaking discoveries were well known across Europe. He became a professor at the University of Zurich and later moved to Prague to teach at the German university. It was during these years that Albert began to realize the immense impact of his work. People saw him as a genius, a thinker who could unlock the mysteries of the universe. However, Albert remained humble. He once said, "I am no genius. I am simply curious. I stay with questions longer than others." But fame brought its own set of challenges. Albert wasn't interested in wealth or appearances. He continued to live a simple life, wearing the same old clothes and focusing solely on his work. While the world celebrated him, Albert knew his journey was far from over. In 1914, Albert moved to Berlin after being offered a prestigious position at the Prussian Academy of Sciences. This was a huge step in his career, as it gave him the resources and freedom to dedicate himself entirely to research. But at the same time, the world was changing rapidly. World War I broke out, and millions of lives were affected. While many scientists supported the war effort, Albert spoke out against it. He was a strong believer in peace and used his influence to promote harmony. Around this time, Albert's marriage to Mileva began to fall apart. The pressures of fame, combined with their past financial struggles, created tension between them. In 1919, they divorced, though Albert made sure Mileva and their sons were financially supported. That same year, something incredible happened. British scientists tested Albert's general theory of relativity, which he had been working on since 1915. The results confirmed his theory. Gravity could bend light. This was a revolutionary discovery that changed how we understood the universe. The news spread like wildfire, and Albert Einstein became a global icon overnight. Newspapers around the world printed headlines like, "Einstein's theory proven true." For the first time in history, a scientist was treated like a celebrity. When asked how he felt about his newfound fame, Albert replied with his usual wit, "If my theories are proven wrong, the Americans will say I am a German, and the Germans will say I am a Jew. If my theories are proven right, the Germans will say I am a German, and the Americans will say I am a Jew." This statement reflected the challenges he faced as a Jewish scientist in a world filled with prejudice. In the 1920s, Albert traveled the world, giving lectures and meeting other scientists. He visited the United States, Japan, and many other countries, sharing his ideas and learning from others. Despite his global fame, Albert's curiosity and love for science continued to drive him forward. Albert traveled to many countries, sharing his ideas and inspiring the next generation of thinkers. He used his fame to advocate for peace, speaking out against war with the belief that peace cannot be kept by force, it can only be achieved by understanding. He also stood up for the rights of minorities and refugees, becoming a voice for those who had none. However, as his fame grew, so did the criticism. Some accused him of being too idealistic, while others tried to discredit his work. But Albert faced these challenges with grace, famously saying, "Great spirits have always encountered violent opposition from mediocre minds." In 1933, with the rise of the Nazi regime in Germany, Albert was forced to flee the country. As a Jewish scientist, his life was in great danger. The Nazis burned his books and labeled his theories as Jewish science. Albert moved to Princeton, New Jersey, where he joined the Institute for Advanced Study. Though heartbroken by what was happening in Germany, he remained hopeful, famously saying, "In the middle of difficulty lies opportunity." Albert became an American citizen in 1940 and spent the rest of his life in the United States. During World War II, Albert was asked to support the development of an atomic bomb. Although he didn't have a direct role in its creation, his famous equation, E equals mc squared, laid the foundation for nuclear energy. Albert was deeply troubled when he learned about the bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki in 1945. He regretted that his work had been used for destruction and spent the rest of his life advocating for nuclear disarmament. He once said, "Mankind invented the atomic bomb, but no mouse would ever construct a mousetrap." Even though he was one of the most famous people in the world, Albert lived a simple, humble life. He refused to own a car, didn't wear socks, and often spent time sailing, despite not knowing how to swim. His curiosity never faded. He continued asking questions about the universe, from the nature of black holes to the possibility of time travel. Albert believed there was always more to learn. In his later years, he focused on trying to unify the forces of nature into one theory, a challenge that remains unsolved today. Even as his health declined, Albert kept working until his final breath. On April 18, 1955, Albert Einstein passed away at the age of 76. His last words, spoken in German, were never recorded because the nurse by his side didn't understand the language. Albert Einstein's contributions to science, peace, and humanity remain unparalleled. His story is a reminder that struggles shape greatness. Despite facing rejection, ridicule, and war, Albert never gave up on his dreams. His life shows us three key lessons. Struggles lead to greatness. Albert faced many challenges but always kept moving forward. Curiosity drives progress. He taught us to question everything and seek answers, no matter how difficult they seem. Humility is powerful. Even with fame, Albert stayed grounded, showing that true greatness lies in simplicity. Today, his name is synonymous with genius, but his story is about much more than intelligence. It's about perseverance, courage, and the belief that one person can change the world. Albert Einstein's life proves that greatness isn't about being perfect. It's about being passionate, persistent, and unafraid to challenge the impossible. His words still resonate today. Try not to become a man of success, but rather try to become a man of value.